Yep.
Well, the church bells downtown is saying it's 3 o'clock, but it may be,
Okay.
we may need a few more seconds.
Well, wait a minute. Your clock, Wayne, says 3:10.
No, because Mr. North, I got rid of that clock. And it was bothering you, so I just threw it away.
Wait a minute. You're saying you're not on the clock anymore? Well, I never thought you were on the clock, so that's a good deal.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, I guess it's close enough. If the church bells are ringing, that's good enough for me.
Yes, sir.
I certainly want to welcome all of you and call the meeting to order for Regional Commission meeting on this rainy old Thursday afternoon on March 25th. And if you would, please, Wayne, I guess we can do the roll call and then we will ask Phil to read the announcement that he typically reads concerning our Zoom meetings.
Yes, sir. Also, I think Brian's going to tell me if someone comes in while we're calling the roll, so I'll make sure that they're registered.
Great.
Absolutely.
Ms. Cox, Mr. Lanford,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vanderstal,
Present.
Mr. Clinton,
Here.
Ms. Henderson, Ms. LaRue, Ms. Martin, Mr. Martin, Mr. Billy Martin. He will be here. He's just on the TPO meeting, so we'll wait for him to get in. Mr. Collins, Mr. Spence, Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Carter, Mr. Whitlow, Mr. Inslow, Ms. Smith,
Present.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Here.
Mr. Hutchins, Mr. Dean Martin,
100 days between the adject and the award date.
Mr. Dean Martin, Mr. Radford,
Here.
Mr. North,
Here.
Mr. Osborne, Mr. Osborne, Miss Onitis, Mr. Tucker,
Here.
Mr. Bestbitch,
Here.
Miss Moon Reynolds,
Here.
Dr. Stanko Downey,
Present.
Mr. Jeffrey,
Here.
Mr. Gusler,
Here.
Mr. Vollison, Mr. Wallace,
Present.
Mr. Saunders, Ms. King,
Here.
Mayor Marshall, Mr. Irvin.
I'm here, Wayne. I see Chris came on too.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, James.
Mr. Newbill,
Here.
Mayor Gross,
Here.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strickland, I just came on too, so I'm on board.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Lee
Mr.
Osborne is
Chairman.
here too. Lee Osborne is present as well.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
And Mr. Chair, to Mr. Strickland, to finish out that list, Ms. Onitis joined, and I think that's got everyone. I think Mr. Gusler, if you didn't have him.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good deal. All righty. Thank you, Wayne. I certainly appreciate that. Speaking of starting meetings, and before I forget, I just want to remind the work program committee that there is a very important meeting after the regional commission meeting today. So those of you who are on the work committee, we want to ask you to just hang on for a while today after we adjourn this meeting. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, we need to read that statement of emergency.
Sorry. We sure do. Mr. North, if you would kindly read the statement as usual, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to the City of Roanoke Emergency Ordinance adopted by the RVARC on April 23rd, 2020.
Give him a second.
Virginia General Assembly legislation, SB 1271, passed February 27th of 2021. The March meeting of the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission being held virtually on Thursday, March 25th, 2021, today at 3 p.m. via Zoom. Under the current state of emergency and until further notice, it has been deemed unsafe to assemble a quorum of a public body in one place. Any members of the public may view and participate in the meeting through electronic means. Meeting details are listed on the second page of the agenda. All materials are made available to the members, will be made available to the public at the same time by posting on the RVARC website. This meeting is being recorded as always. Due to the virtual nature, video and audio will be recorded and provided on the website in place of written minutes. When the state of emergency ends, draft minutes from all of the meetings held during this time will be ratified at the next in-person meeting. As a way of ensuring that our meeting goes smoothly, Brian Hill, RVARC Regional Planner, will serve as the host for this meeting. All participants are asked to mute themselves to improve audio quality. If any voting commission member wishes to make a motion, second it, or comment on a motion, please unmute yourself and ask to be recognized by the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. North. We appreciate that. And Wayne, thank you for reminding me. We certainly want to remain legal.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I
Mr.
appreciate
Chair, if I might ask, I see a phone number. Someone's joined us with last four digits 0458. If you could let us know who you are.
Yes, that is Mark, New Bill, Town of Rocky Mountain, Town Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. All right. So I think we have our quorum established, if I'm not mistaken. And as I mentioned, the work committee needs to hang around after this regional commission meeting. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll kind of take this in reverse order today. The consent agenda consists of the financial report through February 28th, as well as our minutes for the February 25th meeting. And on the approval of the agenda for today, I would like to make an amendment. We have joining us today, Delegate Terry Austin. Always good to see you, Terry. I'm glad you're with us. But he would like to make a few remarks today. So we need to amend the agenda to provide for that time. Are there any other amendments or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the consent agenda with the additions that you included in that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Wayne, did you get the motion by Mr. Martin? And who was the second?
Mr. Tucker?
Okay, so if you would call the roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lanford?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vandersdahl?
Yes.
Mr. Clinton? Mr. Clinton?
Might be muted. He's on here.
Okay.
He's muted.
Okay. Mr. Billy Martin?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Martin? Dean Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Ms. Onitis?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Bestpitch? Mr. Bestpitch?
Yes.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Yes.
Dr. Stanko Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Gusler?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Aye.
Ms. King?
Yes.
Mayor Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Irvin?
Aye.
Mr. Newbill?
Aye.
Mayor Gross?
Yes,
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, sir, and thank all of you. And so with that, we will let Delegate Austin have his turn. I understand you have a few remarks for us this afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir. Chairman Gross, members of the commission, I thank you for the privilege to speak before you today. And I also want to personally thank you for what you do for our region. Your work is outstanding, and we very much appreciate that. I do personally, and I just want you to know that. I spoke earlier this week with Director Strickland about an interest I have. As you all know, there's some dollars coming to the Commonwealth, the American Rescue Plan. Commonwealth of Virginia will get about $3.6 billion of revenue to appropriate for different things around the Commonwealth. Some of it has some defined use, others doesn't. So, but those dollars are to be controlled by the legislature and not the executive branch of the General Assembly. So, in thinking about that and the fact that I serve on transportation and I was a budget conferee this past session, and as a budget conferee, we appropriated about $323 million of COVID monies to different transportation projects around the Commonwealth. One of that being the $83.5 million that we got for the second train a day out of Roanoke and to extend the train to Christiansburg. And also $83.5 million for VRE, Virginia Rail Express from Fredericksburg into DC, and $93 million to finish 3-laning I-64 east of Richmond. So having been part of that process and knowing that we've got this $3.6 billion coming to the Commonwealth, I've identified a project on I-81 that I think is very, very crucial and valuable to our region. And that is a project here in the district of which I live, the town of Buchanan North on Interstate 81. That's been a project request of you all as a commission for 4 different times. And we made some modest improvements out there, but we've never had the dollars to do the total realignment. And I was part of the I-81 committee. I was part of the legislative move that got that funding approved to get the $2 billion appropriated to make improvements. But during that process, it was determined that the chevrons had lowered the accident rate and that the money would be better served 3-laning I-81 south from exit 150 to Salem and from Christiansburg Mountain to Roanoke. And I didn't disagree with that. I hated to let this project out here go, but I saw value and benefit with connecting the New River Valley to the Roanoke Valley. Since then, we've had 2 major accidents, and they have just created a difficulty and the inability to move. Emergency services, which is dispatched out of the town of Buchanan, just is paralyzed when these accidents happen and the traffic is rerouted over onto Route 11. And you all have seen on the news the gridlock and the problems this creates. Well, I'm going to make an ask. I've had a conversation with Secretary Valentine. I had a conversation with Deputy Commissioner Rob Carey, Chief Engineer Bart Thrasher just last Friday. Wayne and I have spoken about this. I've got the Virginia Truckers Association endorsing a letter to the Secretary. I'm going to make a $200 million ask that would totally realign this portion of the interstate between milepost 167 and 168. And that would, what I've learned through this process, and I grew up here, I've been here my entire life, is that our area is unique in the fact that we're like a funnel. The narrowest point between any 2 points along the Interstate 81 region is here in Buchanan. It's the Alleghany Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains. And there we have the river and the 2 railroads and Route 11. So it all comes to a funnel. And the only way to get back to the interstate between exit 162 and 168 is through the town of Buchanan. So gentlemen, I would very much request your support in the form of a letter of endorsement to the Secretary Valentine and to the governor. I will be making a request and have conversation with the governor also about this issue. As I said, the legislature controls the appropriation of the funds, but an endorsement from the governor and Secretary of Transportation, as you know, will go a long ways to supporting that appropriation or the request for that appropriation. So I would ask you all to please support endorsing a letter in support of this project. And if we're not successful, there's 140 people in Richmond. I'm one of 140 that are going to be making those asks. And but I think we can put forth a good case to support up somewhere in the $150 to $200 million to make this fix. So I thank you for your time today. I thank you for what you do. You're always very supportive. We would never have gotten the I-81 project funded had it not been for the planning districts along the I-81 corridor and your support. So I thank you so kindly for that. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Delegate Austin. We certainly appreciate that information. Commission members, do you have any questions?
I think we
for
have a
Delegate?
question, Mayor, from Mayor Marshall in Clifton Forge. I see her hands up.
Okay, great. Ms. Marshall, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Hi, Delegate Austin, glad to see you. I know there was one time talk about providing transportation from the Amtrak station in Clifton Forge over to Roanoke, since we only have 3-day-a-week service. Do we have any more information on that?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor Marshall, Pamela, nice to see you. And I thank you for all you do for the Allegheny Highlands. Senator Edwards and I both put in a budget amendment to request that transportation happen. And it's still in the works, and it will happen as soon as we complete the improvements to Route 220 and get that construction out of the way. The Smart Scale bus, since we no longer have a need to run it to Lynchburg, Senator Edwards and I felt it would be beneficial to get people from Allegheny Highlands over to Roanoke to ride the train, and from Roanoke to Clifton Forge to take the Cardinal train west. So yes, Mayor, that will happen. Thank you.
All right, good
Thank
question.
you so much. That's greatly appreciated. We need it.
Yes, you do.
Yes, thank you. Good question. Good question. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, North here.
Okay.
Just want to say welcome to Delegate Austin. Good to see you. Look forward to seeing you soon again in another venue. However, I would like to say that without the efforts of Mr. Austin leading the charge on 81 and others, we might not be as far as we have come along in improved transportation needs in this area, as well as 81 and its safety concerns. So I find this a important item to address, because all of us at some time or another go up and down 81 North. And I would say this must be those curves up there, or somewhere near those S curves, as they call them. And that is a dangerous area. So before we have too many more accidents, it'd probably be a good thing to get it fixed. So I personally would support that. And Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that the Allegheny Regional Commission consider a resolution of support, both to the governor and VDOT and the Secretary of Transportation, Shannon Valentine.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Bestford, I second the motion.
Okay. Wayne, I'm not sure you caught all that. I think the motion was from Mr. North, and I think I heard the second from Mr. Bestfitch. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. There were some other questions.
Okay.
Chairman. I think Mr. Clinton and Mr. Martin had a.
Right. We will definitely entertain those questions. Mr. Clinton?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to add to what Mr. North said and what Delegate Austin said, kind of from the perspective of Botetourt County. Now, our board, day before yesterday, passed a resolution in support of Mr. Austin's proposal. And some of the considerations were what we see all the time as we drive through there, the difficulty and what we experience. But if you look back in recent years, what's been happening is an increase in truck traffic, which sounds okay until you consider the S curves that were mentioned and the vertical separation. It's a lethal combination, and some of the statistics are really eye-opening. I think we all know that I-81 in general is carrying. It was designed for 15% truck traffic, but it's actually carrying about 26% over its full length on average. This particular section that Delegate Austin is talking about, actually 168, is carrying about 35% truck traffic. It's the highest percentage of truck traffic on the entire length of I-81.
Wow.
And what that leads to, it doesn't mean trucks are at fault, but they're often involved in crashes. And the crashes at this particular section are about twice as lethal, if you will, as on any other section of Interstate 81. And the percentage of fatal accidents or crashes in this section, or the number per year, I should say, is about 8. On average, along I-81, it's about 4. So twice as many accident or lethal accidents, crashes on this section as on I-81 anywhere else. So the statistics are there. The demands on fire and rescue in Balatot, and even on the demands on the psychology of the personnel, because they are high energy crashes most of the time. It all adds up. So there's countless reasons we ought to be supporting this, and I'll add my support to Mr. North's motion.
Thank you. I believe there was another comment, Mr. Urban.
Yeah, related to this, the ARP Act certainly has a big pile of money the state's going to get. Behind that's going to be an infrastructure program that has an even larger pile of money that is also going to go to the state. The door is now open at the federal level for earmarks again. We've had the moratorium on earmarks for a long time. So from an infrastructure standpoint, we're on the verge of not onesies or twosies, but we probably ought to be able to push a pretty big transportation agenda, this being one of them. But I'd encourage the commission to package its priorities and communicate them in a lump so that we're competing not for just this ARP funds, but for the upcoming infrastructure funds, and then positioning ourselves for potential earmarks. Because in this side of the state, we've got this as one of our priorities. We also have I-73, and there's enough dollars in the immediate pipeline to jump up and satisfy those things. So I'd encourage you to really think broad so that a commensurate share of those dollars lands on our side of the state versus Northern Virginia or Tidewater.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Urban. I think Mr. Jeffries got his hand up, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Austin, thank you for the information you're providing. One question I do have is, you mentioned 200 million, and I guess my question is, I am new to the commission, so just help me understand the $200 million request. Where is that number coming from?
Certainly, Mr. Jeffries, I thank you. I serve on the transportation committee in the legislature, and through the preliminary planning of the improvements for the I-81 plan, we had done assessment cost of projects that we found a benefit and value. This area north of Buckhannon, the S-turns, as it was referred to, is the proper location we're talking about. The estimated value at that time was between 140 and 160 million dollars. I don't think we have to be specific. I am being specific in my request to the secretary of up to $200 million, just so I don't underestimate those values. I did have a conversation with the chief engineer and the deputy commissioner last Friday, and Rob Carey, the deputy commissioner, his estimated cost at now is around $150 million. But I've asked Secretary Valentine to submit a $200 million set aside for this project so we can identify and appropriate the funds accordingly. Now, keep in mind, this project would be 3 years out probably by the time it goes under, right-of-way acquisition, engineering, design, and bidding. I don't know what the inflated cost could be at that time. So that's why I used the $200 million cost, Mr. Earl.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Delegate Austin. Any other hands? I don't see anyone else on my computer screen. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. North has a comment.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Urban makes a great point, and I think between now and probably May, I think the American Relief Plan is supposed to send some money sometime within the next 60 days, the last time period. They're still working on the rules and regulations. However, I read with great interest the American infrastructure bill that's coming out. They're looking at $3 trillion, of which I understand $1 trillion would be coming to the States for infrastructure, specifically roads, bridges, that sort of thing. So we probably ought to be thinking about the resolution downstream, not necessarily today, about these other revenue streams and projects. As a matter of fact, the infrastructure one, we don't know enough about just yet, unless they come out with it tomorrow or next week. But to Mr. Irvin's point, I think that at the next meeting, we probably should advocate for that American Relief Plan in some way, of a resolution of thanks to our local leaders at the national level. Just something to ponder. And in the meantime, staff should be looking at some of the things that we might be able to do with some of those funds.
Yeah.
I see Mr. Austin's got his hand up, I think.
Yes, sir, I do. Mr. North, thank you, Phil, for that. And thank you for your kind comments earlier and your motion. But let me also say I've been working on another project outside of our region, and that's called the Southern Connector. And the Southern Connector is a connection between the North Carolina border and Route 58. And that's an area, $650 million. And the CTB had a member ready to pull the plug. We had done 2 years of a 3-year study. And one of our CTB members from Northern Virginia wanted to not fund the 3rd year of that study. And myself and others drafted a letter in Richmond and got to Secretary Valentine. We had some meetings and we were able to keep that funding in place. That is a very important project that needs to happen. I've been working with some others, some legislators, Senator Stanley, myself, and Haywood Fralin and Ben Davenport and others to try to posture and put in place a funding stream by which that project could happen. And it really needs to happen. That Martinsville, Henry County, Franklin County has a beautiful industrial park, and it's going to be challenging without road improvements to build that park out successfully. And the connection between Martinsville, Danville, and the Roanoke and the North Carolina border all needs to happen, whether it's I-73 or an improved 4-lane. I don't know what it'll be just yet, but I fully support that. And I have encouraged some others to make a request for funding for that Southern Connector through part of this $3.6 billion stimulus money. You know, as a conferee, these dollars, we want to spend these dollars as a one-time appropriation. And it's, you know, it's kind of difficult to find places to spend $3.6 billion when you've not been looking. Now, we can certainly do it. I understand some of my colleagues want to use some of those dollars for school construction and school improvement, which I wouldn't be opposed to. But I think one thing I think needs to happen is that money needs to be spent equitably around the Commonwealth and not concentrated either in Northern Virginia or Tidewater or Richmond. We need to get our portion of it also. So I look forward to working with you, and I look forward to working with you not only on this project, but the Southern Connector and improvements throughout 220 to Franklin County from Roanoke. So thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. Good comments. Mr. Jeffrey, I think you have your hand up, sir.
Yes, and I don't want to keep belaying this conversation. It's something that Mr. North mentioned. He mentioned that eventually there are going to be additional funding coming federally to our state. And I guess my question is, the $200 million that we're requesting right now, there are going to be additional dollars coming in. And so I'm kind of wondering, do you think that what you're asking for, we couldn't get out of the federal when the federal comes into the state? I mean, I'm wondering, is it possible we can do something, agree to do this contingent on what federal dollars come in?
Mr. Jeffries, this is federal money. This is part of the American Relief Plan monies that's coming from the federal government to the state of the Commonwealth right now. It's coming to Richmond in the form of American Relief Fund money. So there's $3.6 billion, and there will be future dollars coming also.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the future dollars that's coming.
Well, I would like to make this request out of this $3.6 billion that we have now that the Commonwealth's going to be looking for somewhere to appropriate, and then also ask for $2 billion to complete the $4 billion of identified need to Interstate 81. The legislation that we passed 2 years ago put in place a funding stream of $2 billion. The needs identified at that time were $4 billion. So
Okay.
I would like to fulfill that $4 billion request with the additional stimulus money that will be coming from the federal government.
I got you. Okay.
And I apologize. I referred to you as Mr. Irving a minute ago, Mr. Jeffries. I apologize.
That's all right. Me and Mr. Irvin look alike. Don't worry about it.
Yes, you did. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Jeffries.
All right.
Thank you, folks, for all those remarks and comments. They're all very important, that's for sure. Any other questions or comments?
Mr.
If
Chairman,
not,
could we
yes.
have clarification? Mr. North's motion was for a resolution. Mr. Delegate Austin was asking for a letter of support. Are we going to, is the vote for a resolution, or is that?
Mr. Austin, what do you look for? A letter?
I would probably a letter. Wayne has worked up a draft letter for me that I think he has prepared to present to you all today. That's very, very well done. And I think that letter is great. So I think that would suffice if you all agree.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Strickland where that letter is, or is he going to bring it to the next meeting, or?
We just finished it today. Well, I actually sent it to, I guess, Mr. Delegate Austin late last night, first thing this morning. We still put some things in. I mentioned to Mr. Austin that this issue of public safety and emergency vehicles, that when it gets clogged up on Route 11, they can't get north of Buchanan to Arcadia and some of those places to provide. I want to make sure that it's clear that it's a public safety issue and not just, just moving people, trucks or whatever on Interstate 81.
It is, Wayne. Wayne, that's a very important component. Part of the funding appropriation says that it can be used for safety purposes. Emergency services, EMS cannot move out of the building. It's a combination of things. It's safety on the interstate, but it's also public safety getting to people in the time of a need when the highways are choked up. So it's safety should be an important criteria in the letter. Not just safety of travel on the interstate, but safety in the northern part of Botetourt County with the response of emergency services, Wayne.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification, it's my understanding that this money, to Mr. Jeffries' question, is coming from the federal government to the state. It will not impact the localities, the cities and counties of the Commonwealth per se. This is funds coming from the federal government to the state. And I would also say, with that said, I would like to amend my earlier motion for a resolution to make a motion for a letter of support as requested by Delegate Austin to Executive Director Strickland.
As the seconder of the motion, I accept the amendment.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, both of you, as a matter of fact. Any other comments, questions? All right, we do have a motion on the floor and a second. Wayne, if you would call the roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lanford,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vanersdal,
Yes.
Mr. Clinton,
Yes.
Mr. Billy Martin,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Dean Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Aye.
Ms. Onitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Yes.
Ms. Moon Reynolds, Dr. Stanko Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Mr. Guzzler,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Ms. King,
Yes.
Mayor Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin,
Aye.
Mr. Newbill,
Aye.
Mayor Gross,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, folks, very much. Delegate Austin, thank you very much for being here with us today. We certainly appreciate all your efforts. And if we can ever do anything at all to help you or support you, please let us know.
Chairman Gross, members of the commission, Director Strickland, I very much appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate all you do. And I thank you for your support and the good conversation today. And if I can ever be of assistance to any of you, please reach out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, and with that, we will move on to an update on Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development Programs. They're saying Kristen Dahlman's with us, I hope.
She is, Mr. Chairman.
All right, the floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think we have a presentation that's getting, there we go. All right, good afternoon, members of the commission. I'm Kristen Dahlman, Policy and Legislative Director at DHCD. Just asked to do some updates here. I do have some more specific information on projects funded in the region for different initiatives. If I miss something, please let me know. With that, if we could just move to the next slide. Next slide. So our mission statement at DHCD is we're committed to creating safe, affordable, and prosperous communities to live, work, and do business in Virginia. Next slide. So first couple of slides here, I'll talk about new general fund proposed that's in the conference report right now. Again, the budget has not been signed. But right now there's authorized an increase of 1.5 million to our Virginia Main Street program. This will be primarily used for grants and technical assistance for communities to deploy with their businesses, really focusing on anything from assisting local businesses to moving to e-commerce or develop promotional campaigns, and technical assistance could also include market studies and prospectus development. I know a few localities in this region also have some planning grants out under the CDBG program, specifically focused just on opportunity zones, but this will be helping those downtowns and create sustaining the communities around them. And then about 500,000 will be for our current community business launch programs, so funding for either new and existing businesses. Next slide. In addition, there is proposed a new CDFI fund to go under DHCD. It's slated to have $10 million in new general funding that will support also small businesses for community revitalization real estate projects. The goal is to go through CDFIs or MDIs in the Commonwealth. And it constitutes this is just a one-time appropriation of funding to capitalize the program, and we were directed to fill in gaps where other federal stimulus money will not cover under either the Appropriations Act that was passed in December or the American Rescue Plan. I will note that through the American Rescue Plan, they reauthorized the state small business credit initiative. If you all remember, that was passed during the American Recovery Act about 10 years ago. And mostly that was deployed through small business and or SBSD and SBFA, our Small Business Finance Authority there for loans. I will say though, there is some language in the federal law that does ask states to prioritize CDFIs and MDIs. So there could be potentially more money that could flow from the SSBCI program at the federal level, and then some of that may go through our small business agency as well. And then that funding can also be used for venture capital too. So I think we have CIT involved as well. So we're kind of looking at that option. I don't have lot more information on how that spending from the federal level yet will be deployed here, but just giving you all a heads up, it could or could not come through this new program that we're about to set up here as well, and some of the potential uses that could be of value. So next slide. So I just wanted to highlight, we have a community vitality series going on. We've already had about 2 webinars, and it's just, you know, as the proclamation that was read at the beginning of this meeting, I know all of my meetings are still virtual, and you know, you have some jobs that have gone virtual, and so like still trying to create a community and a place for people to call home, and maybe that's where they are working from home now, or and so just this webinar series has different topics surrounded on keeping that place and community viable for with a changing workforce or changing office spaces. Next slide. So for CDBG, for the COVID grants, and this was part of the CARES Act, so I'm bringing you all back to 2020 when the CARES Act was passed. I know there's been quite a few federal stimulus packages passed. So the Commonwealth received about 40 million for CDBG COVID. We've deployed about 10 million so far. Some of that was supposed to be earmarked for rent and mortgage relief, and due to just a lot of restrictions, we're no longer going to use the funding for that, since we also now have received federal emergency rental assistance funds, which I'll get to on a later slide. So that being said, we still have time to obligate the funding, and we have about 30 million left. And so some eligible activities are food security, food pantry support, housing and homelessness services, small business relief, non-congregate shelter support, construction or rehab of structures to be used for shelters, testing or equipment manufacturing, acquisition costs for telework or telemedicine services, and job creation or business development for manufacturing of COVID-related materials. So it does have to have, I think the key here is a relation to COVID. I would say the majority of the projects right now that have come in really have surrounded around small business support or food security at this time. Some really innovative projects. But just to let you all know that this funding opportunity is still available right now. If you go to the next slide, but in addition to the CDBG CARES Act funding, we have our regular CDBG funding, and so applications are due April 1st, but we also have our open submission round from April 1st to December 31st, and you can see our funding allocations there for the different program areas: urgent need, regional water, wastewater, construction ready, water and sewer, and economic development, entrepreneurship, and then planning grants as well. And back in December, for when the central appropriations was passed, the Commonwealth received an extra $1 million for this fiscal year. And I mean, if they sustain that level, it should remain that we have an extra $1 million each year just for central appropriations for regular CDBG as well. And I did just want to know, so we've total invested since 2019 right now for, and this also includes broadband projects and some in our CDBG, but it's been over 8.5 million invested just in this region right here for CDBG. And I can go into more specifics if folks have specific questions about any of those projects. Mainly I have the funding levels in front of me. I don't specifically work on the CDBG program, but if anybody has questions about some of these initiatives, I can certainly get you more information on that. Next slide. So going back to state general funding for the Housing Trust Fund, right now in the conference report, 70.7 million for this current fiscal year. So some of that was earmarked to continue the Virginia Rent and Mortgage Relief Program as a bridge before we received federal funds. Our rent and mortgage relief program was set up just using coronavirus relief funds last year. Governor Northam, General Assembly authorized for us to start this program in June of last year. And so we obligated all of that funding through December. And so some of the Housing Trust Fund allowed us to bridge that gap until we received the federal emergency rental assistance funds. In addition, for fiscal year 2022, the Housing Trust Fund will have 55 million, which is a huge increase from past fiscal year funding for the Housing Trust Fund moving forward. For right now, just the board approved. So in the code, it's supposed to be 80% of the funds are supposed to be used for our affordable and special needs housing loan pool, competitive loan pool, and then 20% are for the homelessness grants. And that was temporarily approved by the board to be 60-40 instead. So that's just for fiscal year 2021. I anticipate that we'll go back to our 80-20 split for fiscal year 2022. I also want to bring to your attention here too, back in 2020, there's legislation passed, the Virginia Preparedness Flood Act, which authorized the Commonwealth to officially participate in the Relie auction process. And in the code, 45% of the proceeds are going to go to the Department of Conservation and Recreation for loans to localities for resiliency and flooding issues. And then 50% of the proceeds are going to be coming to DHCD for low-income energy efficiency and eligible housing developments. So we've had a work group going on since December. It's an informal stakeholder advisory group that's helped us to inform where we're going to direct the proceeds to. So in March, the Commonwealth participated in the first auction, which produced $43 million for the Commonwealth. And so from the March proceeds, we're going to have about $21 million to go into 2 different programs. So our stakeholder advisory group, and upon DHCD's recommendation, this is still pending approval from the administration right now, but the goal was to capitalize off of existing programs to deploy the funds quickly to help low-income Virginians. And so one of them will be through the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Competitive Loan Pool, incentivizing either rehab or new construction projects. Some of them will be LIHTC projects to go above the energy code and perform better, lower utility rates over time for residents, and incentivize the developers to cover the cost of putting in these upgrades. And then the other portion of the funds are slated right now to go to DHCD's weatherization program. We do have federal funding right now for that. But what we've heard from the Weatherization Network and is lately well, I'll backtrack. Yeah, so lately, the funding has been stagnant until now, and I'll get to that. But it's also been limited in what the Weatherization Network can do. So especially in some areas, in all areas of the Commonwealth, there's a big stock of aging housing stock. And unfortunately, with the federal funds, we're not able to do certain health and safety repairs like roof replacement or roof repairs. And so the purpose is to tackle the deferral list and try to use some of the Regie funds to tackle that so that we can use some of the federal weatherization funds for other units and quite possibly reach more Virginians with that funding. I will note too that under the American Rescue Plan as well, 4.5 billion was authorized for the low-income energy assistance program. The Commonwealth, we don't have an official notification yet from the federal government as to how much, but based on preliminary estimates, it could be about 108 million for the program. And so some of those proceeds will go through DSS to help customers with their utility bills, so heating and cooling. There's going to be there's two different periods that customers can apply through DSS, and then a portion of those funds will come to DHCD for the weatherization program. And currently, through the central appropriations, that is how traditionally the program has always operated in the Commonwealth as well. So that's all I have on energy efficiency for now. Next slide. So just a couple of housing trust fund projects in the area. There's the South River Development Corporation was awarded $600,000 for a housing trust fund loan in the town of Clifton Forge for the Alleghany apartments. And then the Council of Community Services received $35,000 in 2019, and then recently announced last week $140,000 for rapid rehousing services. So, and currently, as I mentioned, we do have an increase in the general fund for the housing trust fund. So there will be more money available for more projects like this in the future. Next slide. So I know I've mentioned the rent relief program, and I've also referred to it as the rent and mortgage relief program. At the time when we were using the coronavirus relief funds, we were able to use the funds for rent and mortgage. The federal emergency rental assistance funds do not allow us to use the funding for mortgages. And in the new American Rescue Plan, there is funding specifically for mortgages and to help those who are struggling to make their payments. I do not have more information at that time on setting up that statewide program. All I do know at this point is in the legislation, each state should receive no less than 50 million for mortgage relief. So more information on that will be forthcoming. So with that being said, we've rebranded our program to just be the rent relief program, as to not cause any confusion, because we currently cannot reimburse for mortgage payments. And so since we started this last June, though, the program has processed and dispersed more than 114 million in rent and mortgage relief payments for almost 30,000 households. And so of those households, about 20 or over 25,000 have received just alone rent assistance. So we just reached our 25,000 households served landmark last week. So that was exciting. For federal emergency rental assistance funding, the Commonwealth received 524 million. We actually received a little bit more than that. It was like in the 560 million, but any locality that had a population of 200,000 or more could opt in to receive the funding directly and disperse it. So Chesterfield County and Fairfax County are just currently administering their own programs. But the Commonwealth, of that 524 million, we've already dispersed 50 million of that right now since we've received the funds in February. So it's been about a month using those new federal funds. We do have landlord and tenant portals right now for the rent relief program. So Virginia Housing has the landlord portal, and it's for ease of the landlord, especially if they have properties in multiple localities. They can set up one account and then file all of the properties under their account and all the accounts that may be outstanding, and go through that route. And then we have, of course, a tenant portal where someone who is behind on their rent can just apply directly, and that's right now run through DHCD and a contractor. We have heard varying reports of sometimes our support center, there's long call lines, and we are staffing up with our support center. We have 130 employees working right now, and continuing to staff up to meet the demand meet the need in the Commonwealth right now. If you are interested in helping us spread the word, we would love to set up a separate training even with this group to go over how to apply, how we can use nonprofits in the area. Currently, right now, you can do an application over the phone, and I think it's going live next week, but there's going to be an option for a trusted third party to help a tenant or a landlord fill out their application as long as they give their consent, which should help, because in some areas, some folks either there's English as a second language barriers, or we have folks who don't have access to the internet, and a lot of the application process right now is online, even though you can fill it out over the phone. So we also have an outreach and engagement grant that will be going out, looking to give grants to organizations that can help overcome some of these barriers and help folks apply for the program. But if you all are interested, we're calling it kind of train the trainer, interested in finding ways to make sure that folks in this area have access to the program and get them connected. We would love to do a training specifically on the rent relief program. Next slide. Next slide. So I'm just going to go over a few updates for Go Virginia here. And so last year, to pivot for the pandemic, the Go Virginia State Board, they allocated almost $15 million in unobligated statewide competitive funds to create the Economic Resilience and Recovery Program. Next slide. And so in addition to the Economic Resilience and Recovery Initiative, the board is also approved some relaxed match requirements just for regular program moving forward. And then there's also some site policy amendments and administrative guidance coming out as well. Next slide. So just wanted to highlight a couple of projects that were funded in Region 2 here, and some of it, I know Region 2 expands beyond this PDC, but just want to give everyone a sense of what the ERR initiative is funding, and it's basically provided to be a little bit more flexible, but COVID related, to help with workforce or immediate needs for the COVID-19 pandemic. So this first one, so each Go Virginia region was allotted $1 million plus additional flexibility with $500,000 in per capita funding. And so some of the project initiatives that ERR could fund include reevaluating priorities and growth and diversification plans, or prioritize identified industry targets, access community and business needs, focus resources on actionable strategies that expand or build needed capacity, and that support sustaining and expanding firms in targeted industry clusters. Next slide. So I jumped ahead and I told you I was going to show you all a couple of projects, but so I jumped ahead one slide. So one that was funded in this area was rapid high throughput COVID-19 testing. So this is through the Virginia Tech Office of Vice President for Health Sciences and Technology. So it was to support an initial 90-day startup phase for 2 testing sites, one located in Blacksburg and Roanoke, to help large numbers of people receive timely COVID-19 test results. Another example of a project funded in this area is the Pivot and Ramp Up, and this was through the Blacksburg Roanoke Technology Council. So funding was provided to help the region sustain the momentum of accelerating growth businesses that generate high-wage jobs, extend the benefits program to more companies throughout the region by offering education, mentoring, and business assistance programming virtually, and providing continuing services to accelerator graduates. Next slide. For relaxed match requirements for the 2-for-1 match for all projects using per capita funds. So this includes planning, entrepreneurship strategies, implementation projects, and middle mile broadband. And then a 2-to-1 match for the ERR initiative resources. So regional and statewide implementation projects designed to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic. And then a 1-for-1 match for statewide competitive projects. The board also relaxed at this time, no local match will be required for any of these match requirements for these initiatives. Next slide. Just a couple updates for the site policy amendments. So the board, they're approving the use of Go Virginia funds for privately owned sites. There's a 25-acre minimum for site projects. And right now, the work group, it includes 1 member for each region as well as VEDP, and forthcoming guidance documents will be for implementing board policy. So more information to come on site policy, but this definitely has been identified as a priority area for making sites more readily available. I know VEDP had their recent statewide kind of state, they've assigned certain tier levels of readiness for sites. And so board is authorizing some Go Virginia money to go towards site development. Next slide. So just with VADI and broadband, so just an overview again of our Office of the Broadband is to assist communities with broadband planning efforts. We provide technical assistance for also on accessing tribal and federal broadband programs. And then through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, our staff provides technical assistance, pre and post application and grants management, and oversight of the state broadband map. Included in the proposed budget, there is funding to create a statewide broadband map. And although we have one, this one, the FCC with their with the national map, it often providers just have to provide information that a whole area is served, and oftentimes it could be within that census tract that only a few areas are actually connected. And so this map is actually going to get more on that granular level. So we did receive funding to create the map and work with the broadband service providers to really see where the gaps are at a more granular level. Next slide. And currently appropriate in the budget, almost $50 million annually for, and it's a $15 million increase for the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. And as you all have heard, it does fund public-private partnerships to supplement broadband infrastructure construction. There's also a provision in the budget this year as well, though, that there's going to be a set aside of funds for piloting, working with municipal broadband providers as well. So it'll not only be open to private providers anymore of the body funds. Next slide. So just since 2017, over 74 million has been awarded to 56 localities and connected over 78,000 Virginia residents, businesses, and community anchor institutions to broadband. So you can see here on our map, and currently our 2021 awards with the increased funding, as you can see from last fiscal year as well, we were able to reach more unserved areas of the Commonwealth. Next slide. So just a different way to break it down. So our impact and demand, we've received over 145 applications, over 166 million requested out of the funding. The funding continues to increase, but we've been able so far to award over 74 million and 86 million leveraged, and about 56 projects total awarded funding. Next slide. The broadband Office of the Broadband also received coronavirus relief funds, and this was very quickly, rapidly deploying the CRF funds for rapid broadband hookup. And so this just kind of gives a breakdown from our the Broadband Commonwealth Connect Coalition that just showed with the CARES Act funding that we were able to connect more areas through the rapid deployment, and that this happened at the very end of 2020 last year. Right. So I know that was a lot of information there. So if anybody has any questions about these programs, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Dolman, for the interesting and very valuable information. Commissioners, you have any questions or comments? No. Well, again, thank you for that. We certainly appreciate everything you folks do at DHCD. Certainly a very valuable asset here in Virginia. So thank you for what you're doing. Certainly appreciate that. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next item. And I understand that Rachel has some information about Title VI program.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. So the Virginia Department of Transportation has conducted some Title VI compliance reviews around the state, and they found deficiencies in many, if not all, of the MPO and Planning District Title VI implementation plans, including RVARC's. So RVARC's Title VI implementation plan, like probably many, if not most of the other MPO and Planning District Title VI plans, addresses Title VI and related non-discrimination authorities. So Title VI covers or prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin, and the related non-discrimination authorities prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, age, and disability. And so what VDOT is asking us to do is that the Title VI implementation plan should only focus on Title VI. And so they've asked us to remove any references to the related non-discrimination authorities. So, I mean, obviously it is still against the law for us to discriminate on the basis of sex, age, and disability, but they want our Title VI implementation plan to not mention those at all, but just to focus on race, color, and national origin. RVARC has never received a discrimination complaint. I certainly hope we never do, but we do have a discrimination complaint form as required and procedures of how we would process a complaint should we receive one. And VDOT has asked us to update both the discrimination complaint form and how it would be processed to match the language that's provided by the Federal Highway Administration in its Title VI Q&A material that it has provided. So RVARC has until March 29th to correct these deficiencies, and staff created a document where we amended the Title VI implementation plan. It's been through a few iterations between us and VDOT staff, and the VDOT staff are satisfied now that it does address the deficiencies. So in your agenda packet, you will find that the letter, the compliance finding letter from VDOT, the Federal Highway Q&A, as well as the Federal Highway fact sheet, where we pulled some of this information and language to go into this. And in the attachments, you have the amended plan as well as a tracked changes version so that you could see exactly what is being changed. So we are asking you to approve the resolution that would amend this Title VI implementation plan and bring it into compliance.
All right, thank you very much, Rachel. So, Commission, you have before you a resolution that would in fact adopt the updated Title VI implementation plan. Is there a motion?
So move, Stephanie Moon Reynolds.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Second.
Okay, and I'm sorry, who was that?
Me, Alan Tucker.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to try to understand the problem that we're causing by having these additional categories in our plan. Why is that creating a problem for them?
Mr. Bestfitch, we asked the exact same question. What does it hurt? And the response from the VDOT was the Federal Highway Administration only wants you to put in there what they have defined for these three categories.
And if you have additional categories, what does that mean? What happens?
Rachel may want to jump in, but we were just told that it is not in compliance because they laid out exactly the word for word what Federal Highway Administration, what the discrimination categories are, and that's all you have in. If you go beyond that, you're not in compliance with federal highway regulations.
Does that mean you're forgoing federal highway funds if you're not in compliance?
Maybe Rachel knows more about it. I don't know. They're doing this to all, like as Rachel said, all the MPOs and planning districts in Virginia. I don't know if they'll take away your funds or not. I'm not sure about it.
I'm sorry, I don't have any further information. I've been having these exact same thoughts and questions.
But we do have in other documents, I mean, we do list all of the other discrimination categories and other, but the Title VI is the one that we were non-compliant in.
Basically, they told us to do it. And we don't feel like we have a choice.
That's right, Mr. Osborne. I mean, they send us the checks and you know.
And we only get 5 million every year. So we want to keep that revenue stream.
Well, the TPO gets, that's right, Mr. North, the TPO gets it, but as the staff and the commission has to adopt it. So
exactly,
you're right.
I certainly understand that, Mr. Chairman, but I just wonder if this was the best use of their resources and time to go through all these plans from all over the Commonwealth of Virginia and decide after a year and a half or more that all of a sudden this is creating a big headache for them. I think they could have been spending their time doing something that would have helped us a lot more than that.
I think, Mr. Bestfitch, that it was the Federal Highway Administration that looked at VDOT, their language, and VDOT had to respond, and we're having to respond.
I certainly understand your comments there, Bill, but sounds like it's one of those things that if we want to continue to receive those grants, then certainly have to be in compliance. So not much choice, I don't think.
Mr. Chairman, to
Yes.
Mr. Bestwich's last comment, I will say that that during the TPO's certification review last year, that was one of the items that the federal team identified as a finding for VDOT, and Mr. Strickland's correct. So that was a blanket finding of VDOT, and so that, as you might imagine, has trickled down a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Things have changed at the federal level since last year, so maybe it's not quite as important.
Well, perhaps, but of course, we do have this resolution that would bring us in compliance, and I guess that's the whole point of the presentation today.
There a motion pending? I've lost track.
Yes, there is.
Yes,
Okay.
we do have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? If not, Wayne, if you would call the roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lanford,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vandersdahl,
Yes.
Mr. Clinton. Oh, Mr. Clinton has gone. All right. Mr. Martin, Billy Martin. I think he is. I think they had an economic development announcement or meeting. Mr. Whitlow,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Dean Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
By all means.
Miss Onitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestpitch,
No.
Miss Moon Reynolds,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay. Miss Dr. Stanko Downey,
No.
Mr. Jeffrey,
No.
Mr. Gessler,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Miss King,
Yes.
Mayor Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin.
I'll vote aye and pre-vote my aye again when the current federal administration asks us to change it back in a year.
Thank you. Mr. Newbill. Mr. Newbill. Mayor Gross.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And I certainly understand the questions and the comments. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll move on to our remarks. Regrettably, I must make the following announcement. After 42 years with the Regional Commission, with 34 years as its executive director, Wayne has informed me that he is planning to retire on June 30th, 2021. Wayne, working with other member governments and the staff of the commission, has assisted our region in many ways. There are so many programs and projects that I could mention at this time, but that would be a long list and certainly would take a long time. Perhaps we'll get a chance to do that at a later date. I think you would all agree that he has worked hard over the years to promote our region and its quality of life. Now it will be our job to find a new executive director for the Regional Commission. And there have only been 5 executive directors of the commission over the past 50 years. The last time we had to consider this was in 1987. But we know we're up to the task to find the right person for the job. To accomplish that, I've appointed a search committee, and it's made up of 8 members. Actually, we had asked 9 people. We have 8 active members, and they are Vice Chair Phil North, Treasurer Dean Martin, past Chair Billy Martin, former Chair Bill Bestpitch, former Chair Lee Osborne, Allegheny County Representative Joe Vanderstal, Covington City Representative Alan Tucker, and myself. In fact, the search committee has already had one organizational committee meeting. We met yesterday to kind of get things started and decided on the areas where we would advertise. We're going to advertise 3 different organizations here within the state. And, we'll be receiving the applications very soon, hopefully tomorrow or Monday. We will have our first documents ready. We need to consider the job description and in the form of advertisement. So we're moving along rapidly already with the goal of having someone in place by the new fiscal year. That would be an aggressive timeline, but that is our goal. Obviously, the search committee will keep the entire commission informed. It'd be nice if all of us could be on the committee, but that wouldn't be very reasonable or efficient. So we will keep the commission informed as the process unfolds. If you have any particular comments, you heard the members I read out. If you have any particular comments, you're certainly welcome to contact any of those folks. And I think the press release will, in fact, come out either later today or tomorrow morning announcing Wayne's retirement. So, and with that, Mr. Executive Director, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a hard decision for me to make. Yeah, it's been great for the last 42 years. I've known a number of you for most of that time, good part of that time. And know your families in some cases, but it just seemed like it was time. And so I had worked, 10 or 11 years in Atlanta before I came here. So I thought maybe 52 years of public service would be plenty of public service. So, we've done a lot of good things, as the mayor pointed out. If you went to our 50th anniversary, or at least got the annual report about that, we've done lots of stuff. I mean, everything from working with the greenways to helping with broadband to having our leadership trips, the 13 or 14 we did over 18 or 20-year period, and I'm hoping those will continue. But you know what I'm most proud of? I'm most proud of the fact that our current commission members, you and your predecessors, going back to the late 1960s, early 1970s, have allowed this commission to do the things that it has done. I mean, you have supported us, not only financially, but certainly in many other ways by encouraging us to look at different issues and to take on different things that we may not have taken on. Everything from helping local governments with compensation studies to, looking at the Roanoke River corridor and bringing in 7 governments and 4 PDCs to do that work, and also looking at stormwater and making application to look at regional stormwater planning for the broader area. But I'm just proud that you were willing to do that. And so I've enjoyed working with all of you. And I also am very proud of my staff. I can't tell you, I hired all these staff, but then again, I've hired the other staff as well. Been hiring folks for some time now, but we try to get the best folks in to help our local governments. And it's all about working with you and your staff to get a job done. And it's also partnering with our, the federal and state partners and other regional partners to ensure that we can make this place one of the best place in the Commonwealth to live. So thanks. I want to thank everybody, and I'll be around for a few months if you want to chat about something sometime. So I appreciate it. And Mayor, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. And I think I can speak for the commission and just so many people that you've worked with over the years. We've certainly appreciated your steady leadership and the gentlemanly way that you have led the commission through the years. much has been accomplished. And as I say, hopefully we'll get an opportunity to outline all that sort of thing. I will say, as you just indicated, among all of your accomplishments, I would say that collecting and keeping the staff that you've been able to maintain here at the commission is certainly one of your greater accomplishments. We've been blessed with a really great professional staff, and you certainly deserve a lot of credit for assembling those folks. Okay. Is there any other business to come before the commission this afternoon?
Mayor Marshall has a question, Mr. Chairman. Or
Okay.
comment.
Mr.
I
Mark.
was just clapping my hands for you, Wayne. I'll miss you terribly.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to start around here, but I do want to chime in. I think I'm probably the most senior member of the commission in terms of my length of tenure. I've started working with the commission in the early 90s, and I actually lose track of exactly when I joined the commission, but I think it was about 92. And I was fortunate and blessed to serve under Wayne as chair of the commission from 1995 through 1999, and then continued to serve representing first Roanoke City, then Roanoke County, where I still represent. And I just want to say that I served on the executive committee as kind of a additional member for many years until a while ago, and we always do a review of Wayne, and I think there was only one time that he got less than all fives on his review, and that's because our distinguished representative from one of the counties to the north didn't understand the scale and gave him all ones. But the intent was the same. And so anyway, I've really I think we've been blessed with Wayne, and I think I agree that what he's been able to do with his staff and with coordinating with what is a very difficult concept of regional cooperation and bringing people and groups together speaks well for what he's for him. And I think he can work with anybody. And I just think we're gonna have a hard time replacing you, Wayne. We don't expect you to disappear. We want to wish you the best and hope that we'll be able to continue to benefit from your presence and your wisdom over the years. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just saw a rumor on Facebook that Wayne Strickland's going to apply for the vacancy effective July 1st. I guess we could entertain if he applies again to bring him back for a while, could we not? Is that true, Wayne?
I don't think so, Mr. North. That's fake news. That's fake news.
That's fake news. That's exactly right. But I'm going to tell you what, you gave it away when you took the clock down behind your desk. You're not there today. So folks knew something was up, I know. And I want to thank you for making me feel so welcome when I was elected and appointed to these TPO and as well as the Allegheny Regional Commission. You first thing you did was wrote me a letter, gave me a handbook, and then came and we had coffee and met, and that meant a lot to me. And I do wish you the best in your retirement, and I hope that you can find contentment and travel with your wife and do things like that. But if you get lonely, I'm sure you can come back and visit us anytime. And I'll tell you this though, be careful, because when people are retired, folks start tapping you on the shoulder to be on boards and commissions and things like that. So you never know what's lurking around the corner.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and hopefully we can organize, it's difficult with the pandemic, but hopefully we can organize something where we'll all have an opportunity to comment on Wayne's tenure. I think we all have lots of great things we'd like to say, and There are people throughout the state. Wayne is well respected throughout the state that would like to comment about his career. So if he comes back, would he come in as an entry level salary or?
Maybe just be emeritus, Chairman. Like they do in higher education. They make you emeritus and they give you a little office in the back, in the beyond the washroom, and you sit there and do stuff.
Well, you've certainly educated me on a lot of things. So.
Billy Martin probably isn't on here now, but Billy's going to be really concerned how he's going to get to Richmond to the General Assembly when things go back. Wayne used to ride down to the General Assembly a couple of years, and they enjoyed each other's company. So don't be a stranger, Wayne. Don't be a stranger.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, folks, thank you very much. If there are no further comments, I will remind the work committee to stay on the line, please. And also, I think that you'll probably get a notice. I hope you will. The search committee will be having another meeting tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. So with that, if there's nothing further to come before the commission, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, folks. God bless.